Okay, three most disturbing books I've ever read. I think a lot of people, when they talk about books that are really disturbing, tend to lean towards the violent ones. But for me, it's not always violence or goriness, and oftentimes it's not that makes the book so disturbing. I'm much more disturbed by people being trapped by psychological torture mixed with physical torture, by things that make me emotionally sick because of the psychological exhaustion that I have to deal with in the situation in the book, or just cruelty without meaning, and just systems that are there to destroy people. Those are the top disturbing issues for me, and the books that I'm about to talk about will have those in them. So if you're ready for this, let's go. The first book that completely disturbed me is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This one probably won't be a surprise to many people. What's so messed up about The Road for me is that it feels real. It feels like what would actually happen without any break. You get no break. It's just torment throughout and bleakness throughout. The Road is about a father and son who are traveling the United States after it's been decimated by nuclear warfare. So there's very few people still living. The entire landscape is just emptiness, bleakness. There's no sun, no weather, there's no food, there's no vegetation or animals, there's nothing, and they're just trying to survive in this wasteland. A lot of times I find with dystopian novels, not always, but there's almost like a level of fantasy to the post-apocalyptic situation, where you kind of accept it's so big that it just doesn't feel realistic, that you have to have a level of suspension of belief in these types of novels. But with The Road, it does feel like it could happen, and the writing style of Cormac McCarthy in this, it's in your face. It's simple and gritty, and there's nothing flashy about it. It's just bleak. And as I said, there's no escape from the situation that these characters are in. There's no happy hopefulness, or there's not really any scenes that allow you to take a breath. It's just relentless horror throughout the whole story. And the whole world of these two characters is just people starving and completely morally collapsed. This is the only book that I've ever read that I had to, in the middle of reading it, actually put it down and take a couple days break. I've never had to do that, even when I read horror or other books that I find scary or disturbing or brutal. I can usually just keep reading them anyway, but this one, it was actually affecting me emotionally so much that I needed to take a couple days when I read it to put it down. It was just really, really heavy. And it's a book that anytime I see anybody talk about it, the book or the movie, because there's a movie of it too if you don't already know, anytime I see any comment on the book or the movie, people always say it's great, I will never read it again, or it's great, I will never watch it again, because it just is painful to experience, even though McCarthy does it so well. There are horrifying books like The Road, and then there are books where you just feel completely trapped inside of psychological suffering. And that brings me to my second most disturbing book, which is A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. The Reek chapters in this book are just the complete psychological destruction of a human being that were so painful for me to read. Most people will know that this is the fifth book in the Song of Ice and Fire and maybe watched the show or read the books or already, you know who George R. R. Martin is. So I'm not going to explain all that. But the Reek storyline is just slow, and the torture is not only physical but psychological, to the point where a person's identity is completely stripped from them and they become not even a person but there to be a servant and to always be in fear. It was claustrophobic, and I couldn't even fully read those chapters. I really wanted to read everything in this book. I love the series and I didn't want to miss anything, especially if it could be important. But I could not handle sitting and reading those chapters at the pace that I normally do when I read a book. I had to skim some of it, and even in certain sections jump over a couple of sentences, because I just couldn't sit in this destruction for that long. It was just too much. I actually felt like increasing pressure in my chest while I read the chapters, and I was completely desperate for them to end. But at least with George R. R. Martin, you can jump around to other chapters. I mean, there's a lot of horrifying stuff going on in this series in general, but the Reek chapters disturbed me so much more than anything else in the book that even other chapters that were brutal still felt like a break for me. So I had that. But as disturbing as fiction can be, nonfiction can hit even harder, because at least when I'm reading fiction, when I put the book down, I can tell myself that it's not real. That even if it's presenting something about humanity and the way that we act and the way that we think and the pain that we can cause, I know that character isn't real, and I can tell myself that when it's very painful. But in nonfiction, it is real, and I can't tell myself that. So my third book that is most disturbing to me was Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, which is a nonfiction book. Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer, and he worked on cases for people who were wrongfully convicted, who were on death row, or who were children who got tried as adults and got life in prison sentences. So it's stories of systemic cruelty and injustice, and it's not dystopian exaggeration. It's real, and it's a system that still exists. The stories that he tells in this book and the way that these people's lives were destroyed by this cruel justice system just were sickening. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I felt actually nauseous while I was listening to it. I had tears in my eyes, and a lot of times I was enraged while I was reading it, because it's just so inhuman. And just in these stories, some of the lies that are told, and the knowing cruelty of the things that happen to the people, that people know that they're lying and they do it anyway and destroy people, is just, it's a level of injustice that is unbelievable but real. And as difficult as this book is to read, I think it should be it's required reading for everybody in the U.S. In my opinion. I think we should all we should all know this history. Then I have one more that is just an honorable mention because it's not really a full book, it's a short story, but that is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. So I read this a while ago, and it's about an AI, a psychotic AI who has like all this power over humanity, and he takes, or it takes, these, I think it's like 5 people, and traps them in like a room or just like a space that the AI controls, and just psychologically and physically tortures them in every imaginable and unimaginable ways. And again, this one, like The Road, was completely relentless, but unlike A Dance with Dragons, where I could escape some of the Greek torture chapters, I couldn't escape. You can't escape in this short story the torture. It's just a constant feature of the short story, and people love it, and they think that, you know, it says really important things. But I didn't finish it. This one I DNF'd. And I didn't DNF because it was bad, but I just DNF'd because it was too oppressive for me. I just couldn't. I didn't want to be in that situation. I was like, I don't want to feel this. I'm not getting enough worthwhile from this to force myself to feel this way. So even though it was a short story, I still just couldn't even finish that one. So that one's pretty bad too if you want a disturbing short story to look at. You may or may not find these books as disturbing as I did, because I think that kind of reaction to a book really depends on so much of who we are and what emotionally affects us the most. And for me, the helplessness, the cruelty, the injustice and loss of identity, and the suffering without meaning in these books is the things that most affect me. So they were the most disturbing for me. So what do you think? Did you read these books? Did you find them as disturbing as I did? Or do you have other books you've read that you think are more disturbing but still a worthwhile and pointful read? If so, leave me a comment and let me know. And if you made it this far, you can have bonus pups for The Road. 1, 2. Okay, bye.